Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the Ocean of Opportunities webinar. Today's webinar will focus on growing our ocean economy from a Canadian and international perspective, and will feature special guests Jim Hanlon, CEO of the Centre for Ocean Ventures and Entrepreneurship, also known as Cove, and Maren Hjorth Bauer, CEO and co-founder of Norway-based Katapult Ocean. This is our second webinar in the series, and over the next few weeks, we will be joined by incredible speakers like Jim and Maren, who will share their stories and insights through inspiring conversations, and will highlight the incredible opportunities that are available in the ocean sector. Before we kick off our conversation with Jim and Maren, I want to mention that next week we will be joined by Dr. May Cito, Associate Professor and Irving Shipbuilding Chair in Marine Engineering and Autonomous Systems at Dalhousie University, and Dr. Jim Bellingham, the founding director of the Center of Marine Robotics at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. We will continue our discussion on ocean opportunities from a cutting-edge research and commercialization perspective. Be sure to look for the link to register for next week's webinar towards the end of today's talk. A few important notes as we get started. We want to create new connections and collisions through this webinar series, and so we have set up a Facebook group that all webinar participants are welcome to join, so we continue to interact and have those really great collisions. If you have an idea and need support, a co-founder, skills, or you could mentor or advise a startup, we encourage you to join the group so that you can meet people who may be able to assist. Search Ocean Startup Project on Facebook to find us, or click the link that Rebecca has posted in the chat room. The format for today's webinar will include a brief presentation from our guest speakers, followed by our conversation about growing the ocean economy, and will include a short presentation from the Ocean Startup Project, focusing on our upcoming Ocean Startup Challenge competition. As the conversation progresses, please post your questions in the chat room, and we'll be sure to include them during the Q&A portion near the end of the webinar. I'm thrilled to be joined by Jim and Maren today. I'll kick off our conversation by introducing Maren, and then we'll pass it over to her to share a bit about what Katapult is doing. Maren is passionate about helping ambitious startups make a positive impact in our oceans, and has done so as CEO and co-founder of Katapult Ocean. With a mission of creating a world where a thriving ocean is in harmony with economic development, Katapult has quickly become a leading force in building the blue ocean economy globally. I'm going to kick it over to Maren, and Maren's going to take you through a few slides.
Thank you so much, Don, and thank you for the invitation to join in this important discussion. It's also great to have this discussion across the Atlantic in these special times. As you said, I'm the co-founder of Katapult Ocean and also the CEO. We started Katapult Ocean 2 years ago, a bit more than 2 years ago, and we are part of an ecosystem for impact investment out of Norway, but with a very global focus. We invest with the intention of achieving financial returns at the same time as generating impact for the environment. Our vision is a thriving ocean in harmony with economic development. So we believe there's really a possibility here to focus on both at the same time, both an economically viable ocean and also an ecologically vibrant ocean. We do three things. So we have a fund with investors from 6 countries, so 3 continents. That fund we manage, and we invest into early stage impact-driven ocean startups. We also support all our startups through an on-site accelerator program in Norway. This lasts for 3 months, and we focus on everything from business development, investor readiness, connecting them with a big ecosystem we built over the past years, both in Norway but also abroad. So we collaborate with organizations across all continents. Another of our missions, and equally important, is to catalyze more capital, more talent, and also the big industry players to to accelerate the blue shift in the ocean industry. So we work with all these different stakeholders in the blue economy to do this. And by doing that, we also support our startups. And our ambition is really to show some success stories and show that investing in the blue economy is a great thing, both for the ocean, of course, but also with financial returns. There are great opportunities out there. Over the past years, we've mapped the global landscape for ocean impact startups. We currently have looked at more than 1,400 startups from more than 80 countries. So exciting tech developments and startups are from all over the world. Of course, we see a lot of activity in the typical ocean clusters like Norway, like Canada, like Germany, Hamburg, Singapore. But we also see exciting developments in other parts of the world where some of the effects of the challenges in the ocean are really felt on a day-to-day basis. And what all these companies need is, of course, support. They need access to pilot customers, access to capital, and also access to support on other different parts of their business. A lot of these founders are coming from research, coming from established industry players. We see that the typical startup founder in the ocean sector is typically quite experienced. Out of the founders we have invested in so far, the average age is close to 40 years old. People have had C-level positions in maritime companies previously, or they've been professors in relevant topics. So I'm really impressed by the quality and the experience of the founders that we see out there. So far, we've invested into 23 companies from 14 countries and 4 continents. And the topics we'll look at, all of it has to be focused on impact, sustainability. We measure the impact these startups have on the ocean. It could be everything from a reduction in CO2 footprint to reduction in the treatment of sea lice. It could be kilograms of waste or plastics that it's stopped from entering the ocean. There are different KPIs on impact for each of these startups, in addition to, of course, the financial returns. Our sectors, we divided into 5 so far. We've invested into 4 of them. And you see them here. It's harvesting, which encompasses everything we take out of the ocean. So that's tech to make aquaculture more sustainable, algae, seaweed, sustainable fishing practices. We look at transportation, so making shipping more sustainable tourism, boating as well. We'll look at ocean health. That has to do with waste management. Some of those solutions might also be on land to stop pollution from entering the ocean. We also look at the frontier tech, we call, which is using new data and using some of the new exponential technologies to understand the ocean and use it in new ways. The 5th bucket we have is energy. And we look at those projects as well, but we have so far not invested in any energy projects. We take our companies through our Katapult Ocean Accelerator. We have a tailor-made program that focuses on all the aspects of building a business. We focus a lot also on how to build and scale a team. At the stage we invest in the startups, they have a prototype, they have a small team, they have some soft funding, maybe some angel investors on board, but they're really preparing now for raising a bigger round of funding. They are preparing to scale and to really get some paying customers and to grow and scale their team. And to do that, it's really, we see that we can really help them in professionalize and preparing for those big milestones. And the big network we've built with customers, with universities, research institutions, and so on, is something that's great for the startups to get access to. We also work with the UN Global Compact, World Economic Forum, and also with the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, where we're part of the advisory network. And by using that, we give these startups access to relevant stakeholders that they, in other circumstances, would have been more challenging for them to reach. We have a big mentor network, more than 120 people from all over the world, from different disciplines, investors or subject matter experts, industry leaders that support these startups. And of course, we invest in them. We invest from $150,000 and upwards. And we leverage the big network we have. So we brought these startups to different field trips, to Hamburg, to around towards the coast in Norway, where a lot of the ocean activity is happening. And we also had planned the trip to Singapore and Hong Kong in March, April, but due to the circumstances these days, we have postponed that trip until things are safe again. This is our global ecosystem that we're very proud of, with mentors, investors, and partners. And we really believe that we need to collaborate and share information to build a sustainable blue economy. It's great to see the increased focus on this and a lot of players in this field. I think that's so important for all of us to collaborate to really nurture and grow this ecosystem of early stage startups and support them to bring them up through the scale-up phase and then to build strong, solid companies. And now I just want to show a couple of examples of companies we've invested in to make it a bit more tangible. Outloud Space is a company from Morocco. They have developed AI for drones to monitor huge coastal areas completely autonomously. And now they use this to identify illegal fishing vessels. Evoy is a Norwegian company. They have developed fully electric drivetrains for smaller boats, starting with this electric rib you see on the picture. And this is the fastest serial produced electric boat in the world. Algalife, another of our companies, it's a German/Israeli company. They develop fibers for the textile industry and dyes to as an alternative to what's used today to reduce the CO2 footprint significantly and to eliminate runoffs into the ocean. Ichthian is a UK-based company that has developed a dynamic system to extract plastic and waste from rivers and canals, and it's run by the energy and the current in these rivers, and they have now got also support from the Benioff Ocean Initiative, and they will deploy 3 systems into rivers in Ecuador over the coming year to extract plastic there and avoid plastic from reaching the Galapagos Islands. So, lastly, I encourage you to download the Blue Whale Perspective. This is a report we published last fall during our Ocean Conference in Oslo. Here we share more data and information on our pipeline, and we also highlight why we believe investing in the blue economy is a great business case. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Maren. Such an interesting read, the Blue Ocean Perspective. Next, I'm pleased to introduce Jim Hanlon and invite him to say a few words about Cove and the initiatives they are leading. Jim's personal passion is innovation and its impact on the competitiveness of the Canadian industry. He is a 30-year veteran of the Canadian tech industry, having worked in design, marketing, and management for companies in Atlantic Canada, Ontario, and New England. Jim's career has spanned the aerospace and defense sectors, as well as the marine environmental monitoring field. Jim is currently, and at least for the next few months, the CEO of Cove, and is the guiding influence for getting this space conceived and built. So over to you, Jim.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate the introduction. I always start with a correction on the 30-year veteran. As time goes on, I think I'm actually a 40-year veteran. So I'll edit my own bio as we go. First slide, I want to talk to you a little bit about what Cove is for those of you who are not familiar with it. We're brick and mortar. We're a multi-tenant ocean technology hub. The property itself is a former Canadian Coast Guard base that was decommissioned about 5 years ago, and then reestablished after a spending of about $25 million as an ocean technology center of excellence. The property continues to be owned by government, by the provincial government here in Nova Scotia, and the rents fully pay for the operating costs of the facility. So our model is one of cost recovery on the operating building itself. The programming, which is the part that I'm most involved with, is actually paid for by industry. And so our corporate sponsor for the programming at Cove is Irving Shipbuilding. And it's part of their commitment to our Canadian federal government under the Canadian Shipbuilding Program that provides that funding. So we're very proud of that ongoing partnership with Irving Shipbuilding for our programming funding. The organization itself is governed by a business-led independent board of directors, and we're a federally incorporated not-for-profit corporation. As of right now, we have about 70 tenants, including 8 to 10 startups in a startup yard, as we call it, our incubator, that's run in a collaborative memorandum of understanding with a group called the NovaCore, which is Nova Scotia's early stage accelerator program, incubator program for startups in the economy here in the region. Next slide, please. So what are we for? What are we all about? Our mandate is quite simple. It's growing the Canadian ocean economy, but our tool in doing that is the collaborative use of science and technology. So while we do engage in pure business development activities, primarily we're looking for the leverage that we can gain to create competitive opportunities through the use of science and technology. Next slide, please. So a little bit about what we are doing, and by extension, I suppose, what we don't do. Really, we're all about creating collaborative work environments. So we are a physical facility, and we're all about the collision spaces. So we try and get as many opportunities for the 70 plus tenants to work with each other that we can. However, we also reach out beyond the physical brick and mortar and the tenants that are physically here in the building through collaborations regionally, nationally, and internationally with like-minded organizations to extend our reach. We're all about ideation. So the given day at Cove is all about spawning new ideas, be they startups or innovative ideas in existing small, medium, and large companies, and encouraging those interconnections between the organizations to get better ideas to market. Next slide. So this is a drone shot of the facility. It is a wonderful facility here on the Halifax urban waterfront. We're about an 8-acre site, just over 50,000 square feet of space, mixed-use facilities that include workshops, meeting rooms, a large conference room, access to machine shops, and access to waterfront. I also want to tell you, though, a little bit about the program. So in addition to the physical space that is a core part of our programming, the infrastructure itself is a valuable part of our proposition. Most important for us is the networking, as I alluded to earlier. So we have a whole number of programs that go out of their way to connect the tenants to each other and also to outside organizations that will benefit their businesses. Our well-known event is the Ocean Connector event that we hold monthly. We've been doing that for almost 7 years now, and over those 7 years, almost 10,000 people have participated in Ocean Connector events. Because of the current situation with COVID-19, we are shifting that to an online virtual meeting format, and the next one is actually scheduled for next Thursday. And if you're interested, you can go to our webpage and sign up for the virtual Ocean Connector event. A good part of what is baked into the Ocean Connector is the camaraderie around shared drink and food. Unfortunately, you're going to have to bring your own drink and food to the virtual event. We can't bring that through the internet, unfortunately. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the other programs. So in addition to the networking and our Ocean Connector event, we also have a large investment in skills and workforce development led by Dr. Sherry Scully. So a big part of our program is developing new talent for the sector. be those startup companies or employees in existing small, medium, and large companies. And so Dr. Scully has done a lot of primary research on the needs of industry, the ocean industry itself, in terms of personnel, and has also looked at student engagement in terms of what the career intentions are of youth in middle schools, in sort of grades 6, 7s, and 8s, and now shifting towards mature learners as well. So we have a large investment and I believe a large opportunity in terms of people and skills development. And last but not least, we will spawn projects. So under our own management, we will seek out project opportunities. We will seed fund the initiation of those projects. We will find other funding for them, and then we will bolt together a team of like-minded companies, mostly composed of our tenants, but we'll seek partners outside of that tenant group as well. And then if needed, and if not competing with the private sector, we will project manage those and provide systems engineering expertise as well. The whole idea of that is to lift some of the smaller companies up the supply chain to be able to compete on larger projects. Next slide. So our contention in all this is that the whole ocean economy and the sectors that you see on the screen are representative of what we consider the elements of the ocean economy. It's more or less consistent with the OECD breakdown of the ocean economy with a bit of a Canadian flavor at it. But our contention is that every one of those sectors, whether it's marine tourism, food from the ocean or fisheries and aquaculture, energy from the ocean, both traditional oil and gas as well as the growing marine renewables energy, marine transportation, including port and harbor facilities, and marine defense and security. Every one of those elements of the marine economy or ocean economy are underpinned by science and technology. If you were to roll back time, probably 15 or 20 years, that might not be true of all those sectors, but it's certainly true today. So our feeling is that we can gain competitive advantage for that large ocean economy by injecting very powerful science and technology elements to each of those businesses. Next slide. This is a bit of an eye chart, and I don't intend to read every one of these logos on the screen. I will warn you before I start. The point here is to make a case for the fact that we do have a lot of tenants. We've been open more or less to the day about 18 months now, and in those 18 months we've managed to bring in just 71 partners and tenants, and so we have a large number of companies. Represented in that cohort of companies are, as I said, about 10 pure startup companies managed by our good friends at Innovacore, a large cadre of small, medium enterprise companies that are active in ocean technology, sensor development, platform development, some data companies, a good presence from some multinational corporations, the likes of IBM and Lockheed Martin and Lloyd's Register and a large number of others, McCartney, as well as trade associations like the Ocean Technology Council of Nova Scotia, Olneweg representing our First Nations business initiatives in the ocean, and others, including the Nova Scotia Boat Builders Association. And then we have wonderful, very strong relationships with our academic partners at Dalhousie University and the ocean research side, and on the applied research and training side with our colleagues at the Nova Scotia Community College, both of whom have a presence here at Cove. And so the magic of Cove, if I was to summarize it, is in the fact that we have a very robust and diverse community of organizations cohabiting in a common use facility, and then extending beyond that, cohabiting in the virtual version of Cove that we're building up as we go. And I think that's really where I'd like to stop, and I'm looking forward to the discussion to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jim. Folks, you can see why I'm so excited about this conversation today. I've got two great leaders in the ocean industry representing two great organizations that are really working globally in that ocean sector. So I'm really excited to have these two here. So let's start off, let's talk about the global ocean economy, and let's talk about just briefly the elephant in the room, and that's COVID. And just a couple of words from each of you just on COVID, your thoughts on it. I don't want to focus on that for a long period of time because I think there's so much other stuff that we can talk about. But just, I'll go over to you, Jim, just first. Give us a couple of words on COVID and what you're seeing and thinking, because I think people out there would love to hear both of your thoughts on that.
Well, I'll start by saying our thoughts and prayers and concerns go out to the folks that have been directly impacted by the health situation itself, for sure. And then secondly, the companies and organizations whose employees and owners have been impacted economically. And so, I mean, our focus fundamentally is on ensuring the health of humans first and ensuring the economic sustainability of our companies secondly. So I'll say that at the outset. I will say that it was not in anyone's strat plan. Anyone that says that, I think, is being foolish or deceitful. So it's not something that was anticipated. But I do think it does provide an opportunity to stress test the robustness of our sector. And what I am encouraged by and lifted up by is the resilience, the creativity, the innovativeness of the entrepreneurs, business owners, and business managers that I'm speaking with every day in our cohort of companies in terms of how they're getting through this and getting beyond it and making sure that we do continue to grow the ocean economy when this has passed us by.
Maren, over to you.
Yes, thank you. I would like to echo what Jim also said, that we are working closely. Now, the first thing is to make sure people are healthy and safe and take all the necessary measures to make sure that we control this in the best possible way for human health. Then second, we of course we work closely with our portfolio companies to support them on their plans through this, and all of these companies are impacted differently, so it's really tailor-made plans. But there are some key elements, of course, that we need to focus on, which is runway and really how to maybe go into a mode where you really become lean and focus on how can a company be able to survive on with less funds and less revenues in a longer period of time. So I think also that during previous crises, we've seen that some companies coming out of those crises have been really robust and strong. So I hope this is also the case this time, and I think so as well. I think we see some good signals. I would also like to, it's good to also share some good news in this times of crisis. We know several of our portfolio companies have been able to sign LOIs and also close investor rounds in the past couple of weeks. So things are moving still, which is encouraging to see. Also, in my discussions with investors, I see that some of them mention, that this makes people realize that we have to diversify even more, reallocate some capital from the oil and gas sector with this, especially with the oil price drop happening at the same time. And also it makes people think that the current situation in the world is just a small taste of what could be the reality when the big effects of climate change, or if there's a collapse in the ocean ecosystem, for example. So hopefully we'll see a shift in reallocation of capital as well after this.
Okay. Thank you both. So let's move away from potential retraction to actual growth, and let's talk about this global ocean economy. And the OECD has predicted that we could reach $3 trillion by 2030 in the ocean sector. And I want to get a sense from you two, what sectors, what areas do you see growing and driving that growth over the next 10 years and beyond? So Jim, I'll start with you on that.
Yeah, Don, I think it's an important question because dealing with the whole of the ocean economy is sort of equivalent to saying, let's deal with the whole of the land economy. It's a very diverse set of sectors, and so they're all different. They have different growth rates, different opportunities, different challenges. The ones that I'm seeing emerging, just in perspective from my long career in the sector, that hadn't been strong earlier, would be the food sector in particular. I'm finding a huge amount of growth, a huge amount of investment, a huge amount of innovation in both the capture fishery and the aquaculture industry. And so I think that's exciting. And I think from an investment point of view, it's a huge opportunity. From an engineering and science point of view, it's a huge opportunity to deploy very relevant solutions to business problems. And so that's the one I find most disruptively changing. At the same time, I think we where we are here currently, we're in a Navy town, and defense and security issues remain, and they always will. We can wish that they wouldn't, but we live in a very complicated world, and the stressors around the situation we're in right now will undoubtedly change the importance of certain elements of defense and security, but they'll still be there. And so the innovation coming out of that field, I find very interesting. There's lots of opportunities, and a lot of the M&A activity that we're seeing in the ocean sector broadly is still centered on the activities of the defense sector.
Maren?
I think the whole what we define as a harvesting sector, so food from the ocean, sustainably produced food from the ocean. So aquaculture and of course sustainable fishing practices, algae, seaweed, new resources from the ocean, both for food and also other things like packaging and so on. I think that's really, really interesting. And also all the biotech. So if you can call lab-grown fish meat ocean tech, it's borderline, right? But I think those, food for a growing population. We know 2 billion more people will be on this planet in need of food, and we need to do it in a sustainable way. And I think protein from the ocean is a very good way to do that. That is one main thing. Then I think the shipping sector or the transportation sector really needs we really need a big shift there, both because of regulations by the IMO, the International Maritime Organization. We need to find new ways of doing deep sea shipping, completely new ways of doing propulsion there. We need electrification for closer to shore transportation, which is happening already. Whether in Norway we have several ferries that are electric, but I think it's huge opportunities there as well to make transportation greener.
So you've hit on a couple of words there, both of you. Sustainability is one of them. I'm interested in your impression of how sustainability and climate change are going to drive innovation and this global economy over the next 10 years as well. Maren, I'll turn it over to you for that.
Thank you. Finally, sustainability has become part of everyone's strategy in different ways right now, and and also the ocean, the challenges in the ocean has also become evident. We see, of course, it's been a lot of fuss around plastics in the ocean, which is, yes, it's a big challenge, but there are other bigger challenges in the ocean, like loss of biodiversity, the effect of climate change on the ocean, that is also increasingly getting attention, which is great. And I think what we see our focus is really on startups and projects that has sustainability angle to it. So those are the projects we see, but we see really an increasing number of those projects and that combine sustainability element with the sound financial returns. And I also see a lot of people moving from the oil and gas sector and using that competency to build solutions for other sectors. So I see a really increasing focus on it, and we also see the next generation of talent that wants to work in companies that have a stronger focus on sustainability. And then, of course, in this, to touch upon the crisis again, we know that through times like this, people then refocus very much on the core. But I think that the focus on sustainability and the ocean is so strong now going into this current crisis that I think the focus will remain.
Jim, you want to weigh in on that?
I don't have a lot to add. I would agree with everything Maren said. I think my observation is that sustainability is no longer something peripheral to business. It's core to business in just about any industry, and certainly across the ocean sector. So it's by no means a fad. I think it is a core part of the business proposition value going forward. I'm always fascinated by the sort of the lineup between the imperative to sustain the ecology of the world and things like lean and producing things efficiently and reducing waste, and all those things are in some ways the same thing. And so while I'm an old engineer, there's been a long push for many decades to reduce waste in the sense of reduce unnecessary activity, unnecessary materials, unnecessary labor in producing an outcome. And so I think if we can tap into that and align the business interests of maximizing, frankly, profit and sustainability of the business in the economic sense with sustainability of the resource, I think we'll all do well. And I think business minds are all over that now. It's no longer two separate things. They're very much aligned.
So let's talk just a little bit about that and a couple of other things that you've hit on. So, you know, we often think about the oceans as being distinct from the land, but really they are continuous, and there's a great opportunity for tech transfer. So what cross-sectoral opportunities do you see in the ocean economy? And really, are you seeing emerging trends of technology transfer across sectors? Jim, I'll start with you on that one.
Well, Maren said, you know, used agriculture and aquaculture as sort of parallel industries. I think that's absolutely true. So certainly in the biotech world and the food extraction, the food harvesting world, I think there's huge parallels between land-based and ocean-based. I am fascinated by the proposition that fundamentally the carbon footprint, the efficiency, the conversion ratios on fish could be way, way better than land-based mammal food, for instance. So I think there's some inherent opportunities and advantages just in the physics and biology of ocean-based food that we need to take full advantage of. So there's one where, you know, there's parallels, and I think there's opportunities for transfer. The other thing I'd say is that by scale, there are much larger tech industries than oceans in its current state. And so there's lots and lots of examples of a device, a sensor, a component having been developed for the telecommunications industry on land or for the biomedical industry on land, and then repurposed into a sensor for the ocean. And that's simply because of the scale and the costs of R&D in developing some of those physics-based products. It's hard to carry them on smaller ocean plays, but they're widely transferable across the sector. So I think there's numerous cases of that happening. pH sensors, oxygen, a lot of those things started out as land-based sensors and have moved into ocean.
Yes, and I think that there's, you know, both transfer between the ocean sectors. So a lot, as I touched upon earlier, we see in our portfolio, we have several examples of people moving from the oil and gas sector, using that subsea, extremely important subsea competency to build something else for offshore aquaculture, for example, or offshore wind. And, you know, so I think that's really between the ocean sectors as well, really a need for transfer, and that's happening, but also from the land base, like Jim said. So I just echo that. And I think also now, as the increasing awareness of the potential, the great potential in the blue economy, will hopefully also attract other people, smart people from other land-based sectors, where they see, okay, how can I deploy that technology, whether it's hardware solutions like sensor, others, or just, you know, software. How can you deploy that into the ocean space? So it's exciting to see.
Just by there's also a negative of that, which is that not every piece of technology transfers easily into the ocean. It is a challenging environment. So I'm often struck by people that just say, well, let's just deploy Internet of Things approaches to underwater sensor networks. And, you know, the communications challenges are profound and different. And so I do think there needs to be a recognition of what can transfer and where there are unique challenges in ocean observation, ocean measurements as well.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, it's the ocean sector or ocean tech, ocean startup sector is more nascent than a lot of other startup sectors. And previously, we see a lot of development, of tech development has happened from established big industry players like Kongsberg or others, and I think it's a bit exotic for people as well, and for investors also, and maybe a bit scary because it's salty and wet and harsh conditions, and it's hardware involved. So it's a bit different than your typical software startup that is more scalable.
Yeah, so can we dig into that a little bit more? So it is different. It is a little bit more challenging in certain respects than starting your typical IT software company. Can you two talk a little bit about some advice you would give a company starting out in an ocean tech R&D phase? What would you say to them in the early stages that would set them on a good path and set them up for success along the way? So Maren, I'll start with you on that one.
Well, first, I mean, you have to, that's for all startups, you have to be sure that you're solving a real problem and they don't just have an interesting and cool technology that you find somewhere to apply, that you really solve a problem the industry is facing and someone is willing to pay for. And I think it is especially important when you work with hardware, because those development times takes, it takes much longer, so the processes takes longer and it costs more. So then it's extremely important that you know you're solving a real problem. And then also I would, of course, as for all startups, get as soon as possible, get feedback, work very agile, get feedback from potential customers, and be open and share the project and technology you're working on, and get feedback. Do not be too kind of secretive about it. And I think that's when we see the demography of the founders, as I said earlier on, a lot of the people are older, more experienced, and also some of them might be maybe more prone to be more secretive and maybe a bit more old school when it comes to how they develop the product. So what we see works really well is it's a combination of these really experienced founders working with, but still leveraging the younger type of lean startup methodology, or kind of more open way of doing it. And of course, get an advisory board and get people around you who can really complement you and on the topics that you don't know anything about.
Jim?
I'm not sure I can add a lot. I would maybe just to riff on what Maren said. I think that people sometimes confuse intelligence and experience, and I think their experience counts. I mean, particularly in the ocean sector, I'm certainly in awe of the ambitions of young startups coming directly out of an academic institution. I think it's admirable, but my advice, kind of like Maren would have said, is if you're of that mindset, go find someone who has deep subject matter expertise in your intended market and work closely with them. Internet research will not substitute for real life experience when it comes to understanding the nuances of those markets and those requirements. And so that's all important. I think in terms of being credible to an investor, and also in terms of your potential success in the marketplace.
So in terms of your experience, what are you seeing are some of the common trends or characteristics that are making startups successful? We've heard about founders who are a little bit more experienced. What other things are making startups successful? Maren, do you have thoughts on that?
Team. I mean, when we invest early stage startups, it's really about the team. I mean, that they're solving a real problem, and that they have a great team that we believe are able to execute on this. It's cliche, but it's still really, really important. And then the team has to, of course, it's about drive, it's about experience that we touched upon, industry experience as well. Do we think these are credible in front of investors? Because for all these early stage startups, they need funding to be able to grow. Or they need, even better, they need paying customers as soon as possible. So, yes, having the right team, extremely important, and also be able to work agile and be coachable, especially for us as investor and accelerator program. We want to invest in startups and companies that we think we can support the best possible way, and then of course the coachability and being is important. Not, of course, you have to be really believe in what you do and push for that, but you should also be able to listen to advice. Important.
Jim?
Yeah, this dichotomy of coachable but driven at the same time, I think, is a really important sort of tension point. And you see it a lot in the pitch competitions where the audience, and I've been in those audiences, will sometimes critique the person presenting for not being I don't know what the word, coachable, submissive, attentive, willing to kind of bend to the will of these people in the audience. And at some level you need that, but on the other hand, you do need somebody who's going to push away objections drive towards an objective rationally, taking input, but nonetheless remain focused on what they're trying to do. And so my experience with the entrepreneurs that I've worked with, and maybe myself when I've been one, are that there's a certain tenacity and obstinance about entrepreneurs that I think is innate. I mean, there needs to be that in the personality as well.
Hugely important. Last week we had Julie Angus on, and she talked about getting some venture capital. And venture capital from time to time in the ocean sector is sometimes a little more challenging to find. Can you talk about what supports, what capital is out there for companies and startups as they're starting to build and scale? Maren?
Yes. I mean, there are pre-seed seed investors like ourselves, of course. There are angels, soft funding, and all of that. And I think to certain, up until the stage we invest at, I think it's not that challenging if you have a good idea and a good team to get that funding. Then beyond that, I would say there's a slightly gap in the market for ocean tech, because your typical VCs these days, most of them are focused on software, and the metrics they look at are not necessarily matching what an ocean tech startup are delivering on. And I think as an ocean tech entrepreneur, you would like to have an investor on board that really understands the industry and that understands it is very different from a lot of other startups. So I think what we see is that a lot of family offices, we have a lot of those in Norway with a close relationship to the ocean, from the shipping industry, from the aquaculture industry, that could both be potential pilot customers, but also strategic investors. Those are there. There are also we also see some foundations that are also active now on in this field, in addition to other more kind of institutional funds, I think. And there are also popping up some blue economy funds, which is great to see, because I think as a startup, you would really like to have a strategic investor on board that could support you on the topic you're working on. So number of these investors and funds with a focus on blue economy is increasing, and hopefully even more in the future.
Jim?
Complicated, profound. There's a mishmash of ways companies finance themselves in the sector, and Maren's mentioned a few of them. There are some instances of IPOs and reverse takeovers. So there's one company that has presence here at Cove, Kraken Robotics, that's actually a publicly listed company on the venture exchange. But in general, I think it's this combination of the early stage financing tends to be self-financing for the most part. It's a combination of moonlighting in your garage while you're still working for someone else, finding a friendly first customer, using your own credit because you've got a pension from a last job or a severance package. Those tend to be the sources of the seed for the most part. And I will say, maybe a bit provocatively, that in my experience, the companies that come through that are best left to either make it or break it in that first 12 to 24 months on their own, because that's a really good gate. If, in my experience, if they don't have a first customer, maybe not a profitable customer, but a first customer in that first 12 months to 24 months, I suspect they're probably going to fail. They're probably not going to be around. And so it's a good acid test for later stage investment. Following that, I think the norm is a strategic buyer. It's someone that's going to take, controlling interest or significant minority interest or a total takeout as an M&A activity. That's been my experience, and that repeats again and again and again. So you get these rich portfolios of intellectual property held by these small companies with a less than capable ability to fully exploit the market opportunity, and that's where the takeout happens typically with the M&A. And
to add to that, I think what we do quite a lot is also to work with these potential strategic buyers of these early stage companies, and we would like to see some of those investments or some of that M&A activity happening slightly later stage to make sure that the companies and the founder, can grow and scale more before they get a strategic buyer buying all of it. I think that's important.
One of the problems wired into our system here in Canada is that we, at a government level, we very actively support R&D, so scientific activity and engineering activity. We don't as actively support commercialization activity with our programs. And so you end up with companies that have a rich portfolio of intellectual property, but not the same resources they might need to bring those to market because of the support programs being biased towards that engineering and science activity.
I'm going to just switch gears a little bit here. We're running out of time, but there's a question I want to ask because we have a lot of rural communities across Atlantic Canada, and we've seen some really great stories come out of some of our rural communities. Subsea Imaging out of Clarenville, Newfoundland comes to mind. Ocean Sonics out of Great Village, Nova Scotia comes to mind. I want to ask you both, where you see so much urbanization happening and lots of talk of places like Silicon Valley and Toronto and Montreal to go, and you have to be in those centers to start a company. I want to get your impression on ocean tech and living in a rural community or not one of the big centers for startups. So, Jim, I'm going to send it over to you to
Well, I've actually had personal experience with this. So one of the companies that I was an owner in was located in a little town called Jador, Nova Scotia. It's way up the eastern shore here, probably an hour's drive from the city of Halifax. The opportunities, I think there's certainly lifestyle decisions that are made by entrepreneurs to be in those places, and I think those are very, very important. People work where they want to work. There's a decision point there from the business owner's point of view. I think increasingly, because business is internet-based, even if it's a hardware business, that's easier and easier to do. And I think, there is a certain move towards, I think, less dense population areas. Who knows, maybe even accelerated by the current, health scare that we're all having. We'll see. But on the other hand, to be pragmatic and realistic, there are challenges with working in a smaller location as well. And it has to do with recruitment and retention of staff in smaller markets. It has to do with access to materials if you're in a hardware business. So we shouldn't be naive about that. I think there are challenges as well. For me, the sweet spot is combining that deep subject matter expertise that's baked into whatever that location is. So in the example of Nova Scotia, southwestern Nova Scotia is the most lucrative fishing area in Canada, and it's got a very sophisticated set of supply chain arrangements and front-end workers in the fishing industry that are second to none. Teaming them with the research and development capability and maybe the international marketing capability of a larger center like Halifax is the power combination. That's what you want. You want that deep market understanding and the sort of the more general power of research and development and commercialization mixed into one. And I don't think either party has to move. I think you just team them together where they are.
Maren?
Yes, I just take Norway as an example where we're based in Oslo because that's convenient for investors and for startups coming in and all of that, right? But we have super strong clusters along the coast in Norway, spread out and in really small locations where we have some great competency clusters in really small places, but they are just by the ocean, and it's kind of growing out of the established industry there, whether it's shipbuilding or it's aquaculture and so on. So I think, the combination of the expertise in those areas with the more, connection to the more financial center or investors where they are based, I think it's possible to do this by combining kind of the smaller, more remote locations with the bigger hubs. That's important. And hopefully in these days where everyone works from home office and virtually, we see that it's it's really possible, right? And I think that hopefully this whole situation can also kind of lift everyone's expertise and experience with working more remotely.
So we're running out of time. I do want to ask one more question. As a lawyer, I've been trained not to ask a question that I don't know the answer to, but I'm going to ask you both this and hoping we're going to finish on a positive note with you both. And I need you to be pithy in your response here, but why is now a time to jump in and start a company in the ocean sector? Maren, over to you.
It's I think this is really one of the sectors that has great growth potential. It had before the crisis struck. Now, the OECD has estimated strong growth in the ocean economy compared to the land-based industry. I think it's extremely exciting to be part of it, because you can both build great profitable businesses and have a positive impact on some of the sustainability challenges we're facing. I also think that in the post the very special situation we are in now, the oceans industry will be even more important. And I think that strong ocean nations like Canada, like Norway, will really make sure to support companies and projects that are building upon the strong competence we have here. So I think this is really the place to be in, to both have a positive impact and to build something great.
Yeah, I maybe separate the question into two parts. So why become a startup in the first place, and then why become an ocean startup? Why do that? I do believe at some level in nature versus nurture when it comes to entrepreneurs. I think there is something innate in people's personalities that they either are going to do that or they're not. And so if it's in your heart and soul to be an entrepreneur, my recommendation would be, do it. Just dive in and get it done. It's something that I've had great joy doing. I know the entrepreneurs around me. It's a wonderful creative place to be. And so if that's in your heart and soul, then find the support and get that done. In terms of the ocean, to just again riff off of what Maren is saying, is it's such a wonderful, exciting opportunity. I mean, we often lose track of the fact that there are way more unknowns than there are knowns in the ocean ecosystem, but also by extension in the ocean economy. The opportunities are all around us. And not to say that they're not on land, but there's way many more people tilling that soil to sort of create a pun out of it than there is in the ocean. So it's a ripe opportunity for the right people to start businesses, no question.
Thank you both. And I could stay here and listen to you both all day. This is just an amazing conversation. I'm just so pleased that both of you joined today, because it's been a wonderful, wonderful discussion. I'm just going to give a quick little overview of the Ocean Startup Project for you folks who are still with us, and then we'll come back and say a thank you to Maren and Jim. So the Ocean Startup Project. So where we are, folks, is this is a very exciting 24-month strategy here in Atlantic Canada between 6 different pan-Atlantic organizations and the Ocean Supercluster to really start more startups in the ocean tech space. And so it's a very, very interesting time for us, and we think there's a lot of potential. The vision for this project is that Atlantic Canada and Canada generally become the best place in the world to launch and grow an ocean economy. Now, we've got some work to do to catch up to Norway and what Maren and Katapult are doing, but we think right now this is the time for a really bold vision in the ocean sector. We've got $300 million being invested by the Ocean Supercluster. We've got Cove, who is very active in the ocean space supporting entrepreneurs. We've got organizations like Innovators and Genesis, New Brunswick Innovation Fund, PEI Bio Alliance, Springboard Atlantic, Volta, Planet Hatch, Propel, Venn, Ignite, all of these wonderful organizations all over Atlantic Canada ready to support Ocean Ventures. So the Atlantic Canadian ocean sector is alive and growing. So how are we going to go about doing this? So today we have this webinar and we're trying to raise awareness. So what I would ask for anybody listening is, if you are aware of anybody who is interested in the oceans, has an idea, please let them know about this project. And we really think now is the time to jump in. And so we're trying to do webinars like this to get people informed about the project and all the opportunity that exists here in Atlantic Canada. Coming down the pipeline, one of the other projects we have, and it's coming up in May, is the Ocean Startup Challenge. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So I'm going to skip over to Lab to Market. And Lab to Market, this project is based on the abundance of universities and community colleges across Atlantic Canada that we have. We're going to try and help these bright minds take their ideas from the lab to the market. So this program will teach graduate students, postdocs, and faculty researchers how to build, test, and develop a business model centered on real-world needs. This process de-risks things for a potential startup because it ensures there's a market fit for the product and that critical aspects of starting a business have been addressed. So we're going to be launching that over the next couple of months. We're going to hopefully form up 20 teams by the fall, and at that time we're going to be giving $15,000 to those teams to help them get their legs under them. All of these projects will cycle back to acceleration and incubation. So we're going to set different teams and startups up with some great support from places like Genesis, LaunchDAL, UNB, along with Startup Yard here at Cove, Volta, and Emergence, Startup Yard and PEI as well. As well in this project, we have CDL Oceans, and CDL is about massively scalable companies that need mentorship and capital. So it's a really exciting time in that this is the first time ever CDL is going to have a 100% ocean cohort. So that is coming online this fall, and if you're an established company with high growth opportunity, we can help you access CDL. So let's move over to the Ocean Startup Challenge. So as I said, this is starting in May, and this is about taking the leap into entrepreneurship. The challenge is about market pull, and so we're asking industry right now what their challenges are, where their pain points exist, and we are going to launch this challenge and ask you folks and people in the larger community to come out and try and solve these industry problems. So we're going to be accepting submissions starting in May, and for about 8 to 9 weeks, you have an opportunity to work on your submission, work on that team formation that Jim and Maren talked about, and send in that submission to us. Out of those submissions, what we're going to do is take 10 to 20 companies and ask them to participate in some boot camps. And following that, we're going to do a tech sprint where we're going to be offering about $25,000 for prototyping and development. So again, this is about industry providing the startup project with the challenges it's facing, where startups are going to be asked to provide those solutions to the industry challenges. Again, that's this week. 8 to 9 weeks for you to submit those responses to the challenge. And then there's $25,000. And at the end of all of this, there's a $100,000 award for up to 10 to 15 companies. So really, folks, we just want to stay in touch. So on this slide, you'll see all of the different ways you can stay in touch with the project. We are really excited about what's coming down over the next 24 months. We have $1.5 million that we want to invest in startups, and we are looking forward to working with you and supporting you through this project. So thank you so much, and sign up for next week's webinar. And then I just want to say thank you very much to Maren and Jim. This has been a really wonderful conversation. I also want to thank Atlantic Livestream for their in-kind support in helping ensure today's webinar ran smoothly. I want to send a special thank you to Natasha and Rebecca again, who make all of this possible for the project. So again, please sign up for our next webinar on April 16th, which will take place at the same time, and we'll have May Cito and Jim Bellingham, world-renowned speakers, scientists, founders, and we're going to have a really insightful, interesting conversation with them. So if you can't make the next webinar but want to stay connected, please join our Facebook group, check out the webpage, or follow us on social media to stay up to date on the latest developments with the Ocean Startup Project. And again, a huge thank you to Maren and Jim. Just a wonderful conversation, and you're wonderful leaders in the ocean space. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you.